And just to connect with Daphne's poem from earlier, which was a record of people protesting the Iraq War when it started, I'd like to do just a mic check too. Mic check.
Mic check.
They say he acted out of resentment.
They say he acted out of resentment.
I understand resentment.
I understand resentment.
This march is nonviolent.
This march is nonviolent.
So I'm just there. Okay. I just wanted to quote Daphne's poem. The story I wrote for this anthology is called Cloud School, and Eric reminded me of pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. I don't know if this is pessimism of the aesthetic, but it's written some months ago. So, in the future, everyone agreed, though there wouldn't be wars, there would be perfect understanding of how to take care of those who returned from war. It was decided then that vets returning from wars would be sent to the future. There we would go to Cloud School. Then we would be sent back to the past, where having been re-educated at Cloud School, we would never go to war in the first place. In military training, we had been taught to ignore the essentially strange and unreliable quality of all experience in order to prop up the rationale that underwrote our deployment. We habituated around one concept: the enemy. We were also encouraged to forget the phenomenological underpinnings of childhood schooling, the myriad intellectual stimulants and ethical prophylactics that constituted the strenuous activity of removing our ignorance, our pulsing medium, at all times our revolving condition, that which we pushed, that which pushed back. And perhaps that was not hard to do. For was it not that originary schooling that confused matters from the start? Yes, with its way of dividing the life world into discrete subjects, its invisible provisions for atavistic privileges, especially for those of us from the working class, from the majority. We'd been conditioned to look at the world as if outside of us, objects isolable from one another. We saw ourselves as quantitative units of consumer aspiration. What stretch from there to war? The global goal of inanimate opulence required that we compete against life itself. Here in the future, one of our slogans is, no past, no future. But secretly we talk with our past, our ancestors. They are younger than we are. Actually, we talk to them pretty often. They aren't busy conjuring their faces, even though as part of renunciation, one should quit seeing ghosts. We can remember the intimate benefactions they dispersed, the material difficulties they faced, their bodies, their faces, their clothes, their favorite foods, even as we strive to grasp the unity of form's dissolution and form's renewal. In re-education at Cloud School, I learned for 1,000 years we live out the implications of mechanism. In our pedagogical sanitarium, we conduct a study of society woven on the loom of self-interest, where the only thing that was collectivized were our symptoms. The foundational image of the new pedagogy counters that of the old, the clock. A cloud. A cloud can neither be broken nor fixed. Slowly chaos returns. Chaos never died. Here we see the gnarled eye, the whirl of qualia, pluralize, dissolve, and change into another. Before, we ghost makers, we were trained to commune with those we were taught to see as dead. There were many ways to do this, but the most efficient method stimulated hysteria. There is no such thing as an overreaction, by means of a blaring and lyric nationalism. We aligned our quotidian thoughts and movements with the grand arc of national destiny, a formula that shuttles from conquest to paternalism to revenge and back again. We prided ourselves on accepting what our fellows could not, that the primary discipline of the citizen, patriot, should be death. Critics launched their accusatory rebuttals. These embroidered repetitions, proliferating kingdoms of observation and analysis, came last but never had the last word. For as everyone secretly knew, our lives defied representation. I was a beneficiary of early forms of feminism that fought for inclusion in every institution, even if these missions were destructive to women. The legend of women had always precipitated battle. What had been at stake in the old world, and before that the ancient world, was the acquisition of women, after all. During the Forever Wars, however, it was the problem of the violation of women that would underwrite war for both sides, even as the war itself constituted relentless violations. The rhetoric of women's chastity on one hand, and of women's rights on the other, would seem to provide an ethical bottom to the delusional, elusive, murderous, and illusory hours, eternal eons of boredom, grief, and fright, ages of loss, rage, shame, and sorrow. Some women devised metaphysical escape hatches and unprecedented political systems. Some of us chose the battlefield. What was our category then? We were as brutalized within the ranks as without, and despite the seeming justification our gender troubles seemed to offer, there was no bottom to the fall of war, no bottom. We encountered children on our raids. Their cries planed the very air. Quiet leaves reflected the red light. We'd go inside the machine again and ride through the abyss. Technician, predator, drone. On other planets, in other times and places, I have learned that animals do not divide the universe into idealized realms and moral nightmares. At the Cloud School, it was always a question of transportation from the beginning, the ways we made our way. The engines and slaves, the aura of maps, the blinding, obscuring analogs, woman, animal, nature, woman, animal, slave, numbers, reality. It took 1,000 years to change. The last mistake to live out was reality as a number, an analogy that had led to the reduction of the world to numeric value and thereby the destruction of all else. That is, all but the numeric, all but the abstracted, all but the analogical. Evolution has always made use of the convincing illusion, the realistic appearance. The photos of cars parked along every street would tell any stranger coming back what the outside had been fought for. Drives. Most of the outside had remained earthly and watery, but much of it where we resided was given over to machines, who up to now had not felt their dominion, for machines didn't feel then. But eventually they came to feel. We first saw it in the mechanical butterflies. One with tattered wings had come with a letter in its proboscis, a little camera hidden inside its mouth. We exchanged greetings. The butterfly mounted our fingers and rested. Once it had warmed itself back up, it unfurled its message, its scroll, and its targets. It was an old butterfly, and we admired its strength. Before the butterfly flew off, we appreciated its beauty, and we didn't bear a grudge for the message it bore. The endless message. To find us with too much food in those days was the totality of loss and pain, was to feel the full blunt force of what was known as the double life, inherent to every gain and every pleasure. All is lost in attainment, all is gained in relinquishment. What image did we conjure to express, to contain, to figure this double life, this contrapuntal harmonics, biotechnology, discordant accord? The image we conjured was shootout on the roadway, cars and bullets on one side going west, on the other east, overpassing to the south, underpassing to the north, on all possible other planes. Thus we drove and exploded endlessly in all directions, and there was no center to us, only these hapless systems of waste. The plethora of zombie movies in that time indicated the marriage to the stalemate. We could not do what we would. Our system was demo crazy, haunted so-called life, moody, infected with moods monstrare. We sought knowledge, but mistook pleasure for it, for pleasure feels like knowledge. To address our helplessness before our own bodies, they had taught us to override our militant reflexes, that is, undoing our rebirth as technological bodies by ironically showing us how, like a machine, to remain absolutely off. I.e., we had been trained to slow down our autonomic nervous systems ourselves so that our adrenals were like the butterflies we could detonate or ignore. In one simulation, we practiced walking down virtual roads, turning our heads neither to the left nor to the right, as the marauders shrieked, barked, called out threateningly, sometimes right at our heels and ears. If we kept our heart rates down and our adrenals under control, they would just melt away. We learned that to be without fear specifically was to diminish fear generally. We tanked in for our grand future, making over older cultures, bearing down over many times from many elsewheres, with enclosure metaphysics and galleons of desire. Even trees had emigrated with early colonizers, cows and horses. Not only did we fail to make amends, we continued the offense. The promised developments, would they spring up and flow around? Obviously, it was not possible to complete what should not have begun. The houses we bombed seemed to have internal organs, circulatory systems, so that their innards resembled organs, the shape of a curving table like a rib, pillows like livers, broken glass like hair. Amazing how leaves of old trees would keep flickering in the wind and the birds continue to migrate.